Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Strengthening Families Networking webinar for September 2022. We are going to be talking today about a broader view of kindergarten readiness. So I'll start by just giving us a quick overview, a little orientation for those who don't always participate. These webinars happen each month. It's an open invitation to folks who are using the Protective Factors Framework or coordinating Strengthening Families efforts, or just interested in how others are using Strengthening Families. We jointly convene these between my organization, the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and the Children's Trust Fund Alliance. And each month we have a topic, usually with guest speakers, but not always, as coordinated by CSSP and the Alliance. And we always welcome your suggestions or you volunteering to say you have something you'd like to share with the network. All of the recordings and materials from past webinars are posted on an Alliance site, which I will put that link in the chat once I'm done talking. But let's go to the next one. Next slide. Just to mention, these are generally held on the second Thursday of each month, as we're doing today, but next month it'll be at a different time. We'll meet on Friday, October 7th, and that is going to be a Strengthening Families 101 webinar. It's actually a pre-conference offering for the Together for Families conference that's taking place the following week, or actually 2 weeks after that. And that's the normal time on the second Thursday just wasn't lining up right. So we're going to do that on Friday, October 7th. You're welcome to join that, no matter how familiar you are with Strengthening Families, or if there are folks in your network or your workplace who are not familiar with it, this would be a nice opportunity to have them learn about it. And if you are attending the Together for Families conference, which I encourage you to do, this is a nice way to just get started on that, connecting with other folks and making sure we're all starting on the same page for understanding what Strengthening Families is all about. We will have more traditional webinars on November 10th and December 8th with some exciting guest speakers and topics, which we will announce as we go. I'll put the information in the chat to subscribe to our newsletter so that you get those announcements when the registration opens up for each of those. And as always, you can contact me if you want to share information or you want to recommend a speaker. So for today, I'm really excited that my colleague Maureen Holliker from the Children's Trust Fund Alliance is going to be leading us in a conversation about kindergarten readiness and really moving the conversation beyond what's developmental readiness of the child to what it means to have ready communities, schools, and families. We will, as usual, end with some brief updates from the Alliance and from CSSP. Unusual for these, we are going to use some breakout rooms. That's why you might notice we're in a meeting rather than a webinar. Doesn't really make a big difference aside from being able to use breakout rooms. So there will be a point when we're hoping that you can turn on your camera and unmute to speak. And we'll have other points in the large group where we hope people will jump into the conversation as well. So please feel ready to get engaged. And I'm going to hand it off to Maureen to start sharing what this, what the thinking is around kindergarten readiness.
Thanks, Kaylin. So I'm Maureen Holliker. I'm with the Alliance. I'm the National Director of Training. And when Kaylin and I were talking about upcoming topics, we thought, oh, September, how perfect to talk about kindergarten readiness, which I think has everything to do with strengthening families and using a strengthening families lens. So we are going to ask all of you to join in answering this question in the chat box. When you went to kindergarten, what do you think that it meant to be ready for school? What did readiness mean when you were 5 years old and you went off to kindergarten? If you could put that in the chat box. And here you can see a picture of myself in 1975 when I went to kindergarten, and Kaylin in 1981 when she went. Oh, Maureen had new shoes, ready to go, knowing your ABCs. Yeah, school clothes, right? Like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Backpack, lunchbox, meeting new friends. Could successfully separate from parents. That's a good one. Able to leave my parents without crying. Yes, well, that leads me right to my story. So likely, some of the reasons why you're answering the question you are is based on the year that you went to kindergarten. So Jim says there was no kindergarten in 1955 in Oregon. So I went to kindergarten in 1975, and I am pretty sure that readiness at that time meant that I was 5. I was 5 years old and I was ready to go to kindergarten. I am the youngest of 4 daughters, and I really had little to no experience outside of my house. I don't know if you remember the 70s, but parents didn't take you out to eat a lot and, go and do social things when you had a large family. So I was always cared for by my older sisters. And I don't think I even walked into a school before my first day of kindergarten. I don't ever remember my parents really pointing at words when I was read to. And my first day of kindergarten was not surrounded by picture taking and walking me to the school. My oldest sister, who was 15, dropped me off on her way to school. And I think that I probably cried for the first half of the year. I was definitely not emotionally ready for kindergarten. But you can see from my photo here, I was at least not acclimated by photo day, because that is not a happy picture. So Kaylin, what was your experience like?
So mine was a bit different, but in 1981, I was 5. I had a sister who was just 16 months older than me, and I had kind of followed along with her homework and learned to read when she did a couple of years earlier than I did. So I came into kindergarten reading, not because my parents pushed that, but I was ready, I guess. But that was not the norm, and that was not the expectation. So I actually found that when I got to kindergarten, the other kids were sitting in the circle learning the alphabet, and I was, I'd get to go to the library to check out a book or do some writing exercise. So it was not the norm that I came in able to read. The other children were, learning to count and learning the alphabet. And I think that reflects what the readiness expectations were, even though I came in at a level that maybe we currently expect a lot of kindergartners to be at. But that was my experience in 1981.
Yeah, so I think, it has a lot to do with the year that you entered, but certainly has a lot to do with family conditions and what state and what community you were in at the time. So I don't know if all of you have noticed, but there's quite a bit of conversation about kindergarten readiness now. And that has really evolved over the years. So there are about 4 million children every year that enter kindergarten every year. And readiness now seems to be a really hot topic and debated, and means many different things to many different people. And so big changes in how kindergarten readiness was looked at systematically came in around 1990 with the Education America Act, which was really kind of what they considered to be the accountability movement. And then after that, there was No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and Common Core Standards and QRIS. And so all of these systems together really, it had a lot to do with information gathering about children, about specific skills, and had a lot to do with holding teachers accountable for readiness. And so if you search kindergarten readiness on YouTube, I don't recommend it, but if you do, there are endless results. And so in prepping for this, I looked at many of them. And the video that we're going to show you, I think was very well intended in preparing parents for the skills that their children would need nowadays entering kindergarten. But as a parent, I found it very anxiety provoking. So let's watch that, and you can all tell me what you think.
Parents, the Tyler Area Partnership for Education cares about your young children and wants them to succeed in our schools. As your children prepare for kindergarten, we know that the following skills are crucial to their ongoing success. By the age of 4 to 5, your children should be able to do the following: use the restroom and wash their hands by themselves, leave their parents easily, Follow 2 to 3 step directions. Solve simple problems. Ask for help when needed. Listen to their teachers. Share their toys. State their first and last name when asked. Write their first name. Know most of their upper and lowercase letters. Feel comfortable holding a book and track the words on a page. Retell simple stories. Count from 1 to 10. Know basic shapes. Sort objects by color, shape, or size. Begin to rhyme words. Use a pencil. Use scissors and cut in a straight line. Assemble an 8 to 10 piece puzzle. Kick, throw, and catch a ball. Clap to a beat. Try to tie a shoe. Hop on one foot. Turn the pages of a book. Sit quietly for a story. This checklist of emotional, intellectual, and physical skills helps to keep track of the development of children as they prepare to enter kindergarten and beyond. Mastering these skills by kindergarten enables future success as a student. You can download this checklist from the Tyler Area Partnership for Education's website at tap4e.org. When children enter kindergarten ready to learn, they will be better students for life, and our whole community benefits.
So I'm certainly not arguing with children having all those skills. That would be fantastic. And like I said, I think it's really well intended. But as a parent, that gave me a lot of anxiety. And even though I don't have a child that age anymore, I will tell you that my child had a lot of developmental delays. And he actually went into kindergarten not even really speaking that much. And so had I watched this, I don't know what I would have done. So here were my kind of initial thoughts around it. So does a 5-year-old child really need to be all of these things to be ready to learn? It seems like an enormous amount of pressure to put on a parent without an early childhood degree or all of their time to devote to making their child ready. And so if my child can't do all of those things, is the school really ready for my child? And then what about the community? Do they have a role in readiness too? So those are kind of all the things that came to my mind. Go ahead and put in the chat what you thought about the video and how it made you feel. And Kaylin, I will just ask you, what was your initial response when you were watching it?
Yeah, when I watched that for the first time, the first few points they make, I was like, okay, well, this is really nice. It's a well done video. The tone is friendly and everything. And then the list just kept going on. And I thought, how are parents supposed to even think about this? One thought I had was just saying, the year that your child is 4 and about to turn 5, here are some activities you might want to do with them, or, that kind of thing. But just saying they have to be able to do this, this, and this. And I definitely went to that thought of, children who are on track developmentally might not be ready for all that, but certainly kids who are dealing with developmental delays, what are parents supposed to think about sending their child to this school? How's that even going to work?
Yeah, it didn't really seem to talk about any kind of developmental continuum. And so even when I do look at that through the lens of potential abuse and neglect that, we even see around potty training and issues like that, is that this is a lot of pressure as a parent to okay, I need to make my child do all of these things, right? Which they may not be developmentally ready to. So yeah, it seems like a lot of people had kind of the same reaction, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. Maureen, hyperventilating. Yes. The word crucial was intimidating. Yeah. So, very well intended, but if that is their definition of readiness, I'm kind of terrified, right? Because it really puts all of the pressure on this 5-year-old and these parents who, live in many different communities and have lots of different conditions going on in their family. So, as teachers and schools kind of faced the increased accountability standards that we know that they do every year, I thought we could just look at a few things that are happening in schools right now. So the early years have become the focus of closing the achievement gap. And so if we can make them ready, then proficiency will follow, right? And we do know the early years is the best time to intervene. And we want funds to go into early childhood education, but it's just not that simple, right? So we're looking at schools, if you look at the screen, enormous amount of pressure to close the achievement and academic performance and ensure all learners are proficient across identified standards, right? Preschool teachers and childcare workers are some of the lowest paid workers in the country. And since the beginning of the pandemic, they've been leaving the profession in record numbers, which has huge staffing shortages. And so I'm sure you're seeing the same thing in your community. But we have fast food restaurants that are paying almost twice as much as childcare workers make, and sometimes preschool teachers make. A huge teacher shortage, depending on what part of the country that you're in. Teachers are leaving, and most school districts really want to do right by the children that have special needs and disabilities, but often don't have the funds to do so. And I think one of the biggest issues is that our schools really largely rely on taxes of property taxes, right? And so depending on what area you live in really depends on the quality of the school. So yes, Kendall, it is a really big crisis, and we just continue to put more pressure on schools and on parents and on children. So the approach to readiness, this is actually a quote from an educational consultant that I follow. Her name is Dr. Christy Petty-Franziak. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She wrote a great article called "Stop Trying to Make Kids Ready for Kindergarten." She says, the current approach to readiness has persisted despite repeated calls to address the complexities of readiness, alleviating the effects of poverty, ensuring the quality of early education experiences, and despite all of the research on the impact of early relationships and social emotional competence have on later success versus knowing letters and sounds and math. This misguided approach to readiness also persists in a country where universal pre-K is not provided, and the importance of it is debated regularly, right? So it seems like we are putting the standards before the resources that we actually have. And so this really just kind of leads to a question of looking at it through a strengthening families lens, and how can we apply the protective factors into looking at readiness? And I really thought one of the first things that we could do is just reframe what we mean by readiness. And so I think that's just a really good start, and it's small but significant. And so Dr. Petty-Franziak redefined readiness to mean this. Children living within ready families, going to ready schools, and participating within ready communities. So what does that all mean though, right? Because that sounds like a great definition, but what does it mean to have ready families? What do ready families look like? What do ready schools look like? What do ready communities look like? And so what we're going to do here, and the reason why we're not in a webinar format, but a meeting format, is because we want to have this conversation with you. So we're going to put folks in breakout rooms of probably 5 to 6 people, and we're going to have you make a list of characteristics and attributes that make each of these ready. So when you go in the room, you're just going to work on one of these, either family, school, or community. And Lucretia, who is helping us with the tech, is going to tell you what room you're going to be in here in a second. So you're going to be in the breakout room for 12 minutes. And when we come out, we're going to ask folks to share in the chat box and verbally what characteristics or attributes belong to either the family, the school, or the community. We want you to consider the following as you make your list. So using a strength-based lens and considering the protective factors framework, especially for those of you that are in the family rooms, we want you to consider inequities and special needs and inclusion, trauma, racism, anti-racism, parent partnerships and safety of a community, access to healthcare and services, safety of schools, cultural safety, and values. So I'm sure that you can all come up with more things to be considered, but those were kind of at the tip of our tongue of thinking about if we're going to define this, those are some of the things that we definitely need to think about. So Lucretia, can you tell us how you're going to break people out in rooms?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I'm going to put into the chat if you are letters. If your first name begins with A through I, you have ready families. If your first name begins with J through K, you have ready schools. And if your first name begins with L through Z, you have ready communities. And how long would you like in the breakout room, Maureen?
So 12 minutes, and I'll just pause before you hit the button. Does anybody have any questions about what we're going to do before we head into the rooms? Any clarifications I can make? Okay, it seems we're okay. If you have any questions, come back to the main room and we'll help you out. And off we go, 12 minutes. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for participating in that. It may have not been something that you were prepared to do today, because I know that these are normally webinars, but we really appreciate being able to have the conversation. So let's, we're really anxious to hear what you have to say. So let's start with families. And what are the characteristics and attributes those of you that worked on families came up with? And I'll ask you to put them in the chat, but I'm also going to ask one brave person to unmute themselves and share what the conversation was like in their room. So I'll just pause and wait for one brave person to do that. And if you could all start to fill up the chat with characteristics that you talked about for families.
All right, I'm going to be the brave soul. Even though I just found out about this webinar yesterday with Kaylin. My name is Dia. I'm with from Milwaukee, and one of the folks in our group had started to say something. They were in social work, and so at some point maybe they will be able to come on and finish their statement, because I think they were going to say something very important. But after we got past families need to have stable housing, know that they're going to be kind of staying put, right, at least through the winter, through the school year, and having enough food and being in a home where they're not afraid, they're not worried about their own safety. After we kind of got past those things, we even went into talking about stable physical and mental health. Physical health, going to your doctor appointments, mental health, maybe having a support network around you, whether it's therapy or whether it's just friends and family, that whole village concept to help with your child and actually with yourself. What is that? What does the mental health look like in this family? And not just the parents, but right, the whole family, whoever's living in that home. So once we kind of got past that, we had to, of course, also talk about our North Star, right, which is families understanding their power to teach and be their child's first teacher, and early brain development, early talk, and knowing that they have what it takes to be able to do that, as well as we talked about families that have to be cognizant that your child is going to school and there are going to be other people that are not like them in that room, whether it's abilities or races. And what does that conversation look like? And how are we sending our children to school with a healthy, open mind from that standpoint? So those are some of the things we talked about. And please jump in, my group, if I missed something.
Thanks, Dia. That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I think that we see stuff going in the chat here, but all of the things that you said really fall into the protective factors framework, right? So as a parent, you need to have resilience and be flexible because you know that there's going to be a lot of changes with your child, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, right? So really knowing what are the expectations of kindergarten, concrete support in times of need, all of the things that we talk with stable housing, and then social emotional competence of children, right? So that comes into play. Are they ready to make friends? Can they self-regulate? Can they, sit? All of those things that are kind of expected of them. So keep those coming in the chat box if you have more things to add about the family. And we will switch to schools and say, what was your list for ready schools? What does it mean for a school to be ready for all children? And someone else who is brave, unmute. Kimberly, is that you? I just saw you unmute.
Yes, thank you. I'm with the United Way of the Capital Region in Pennsylvania. So I am more community-based than school-based, but I do partner with school districts. And Kimberly and Jason and my group, we had very similar views on schools being prepared and ready for children to come. So we talked about really building strong relationships with our school districts. Having the school districts prepared for these children may mean that their staff, the kindergarten teachers, administration, understand there may be issues with children and how to meet the needs of the children that will be coming in. Not all children learn and operate the same. Understanding that there are family issues, maybe trauma. There may be barriers like transportation that could be an issue as well. Maybe partnering with families and children before school starts to do things like I think Kimberly mentioned there were popsicle play dates. So having more open events and communication between the families and between the teachers and the school staff. More family engagement. I know in our area, parent engagement specialists are being hired in a lot of the school districts, and that has proven to be very beneficial with the transition. Partnering with community-based organizations like mine is another way schools can really help those families. And then maybe looking into something, we know teachers are burned out, there's a crisis. So those teachers needing a break or trying to defeat that burnout. So those were some of the ideas that we had on the school side.
Thanks, Kimberly. That's an awesome list. And yeah, I'm seeing some more here in the chat. So I think that, schools need all the resources they need to have in order to welcome all children. And I think when you say parent engagement, that's definitely a step that schools are taking. But I think that we have to think about whether we want parents to be engaged and if we want parents to be partners with us, right? Because that's a little bit different. And if schools are looking to prepare families for kindergarten, having them look towards the protective factors framework would be really helpful, right? Instead of kind of focusing just on those skills of the children, we know those skills of the children will come when children are in strong, stable families. Kimberly, go ahead. Kimberly Moore.
Hi, yes, so Kimberly had also touched on, what we're doing here. I am in Durham, North Carolina with a nonprofit agency called Durham Partnership for Children. What I do in my program, I'm the program coordinator for community initiatives. I work primarily with the school district, the community, and getting schools ready and prepared for those kindergartners coming in. Preparing the families and preparing the schools look very different in that program, but I try to overlap it so that there is that level of comfortability. And then Kimberly also touched on, getting schools ready. Something we really do and try to focus on in our program is having, those trainings, having those extra little, we call them teacher trainings. And, this could be something very simple. We have some individuals who will make videos that we'll post online, and they can fill out a short quiz at the end, and get some understanding. These are usually around anti-racism, trauma. We have a lot of generational and historical trauma in our area. And so really working with the schools to get them to understand the population in which they're serving specifically. And we've done that by getting data for the zip codes and then specifically touching that area with those teachers. So my relationship with every single kindergarten teacher in my county, it goes throughout the entire year. And it's to help avoid that burnout.
Yeah, so Kimberly, thanks for bringing that up. I think that one of the important things that you said is this idea of professional development for teachers, because a lot of teachers, if you ask them, they did not go to school because they love interacting with families. They went to school because they love children and teaching children. But we know that children don't show up alone. And if we want the best outcomes for children, we have to embrace the family in which they show up with, right? So thanks for sharing all of that. So keep those coming in the chat box. And now I'll just move to, I know our schedule is getting kind of tight, so we'll move to community and say, what are the attributes that you think a ready community has to have in order for children to be prepared for kindergarten? What are the community conditions that are supportive of schools and young families?
I'd be happy to jump in. This is one of the 3 Maureen's on this call. This is
I know, we were talking about that at break.
I'm getting a message saying that I can't be on video, which is all right with me, but I'm getting a message saying that there's something wrong with okay. You have to put me on video. So, ready communities, we talked about just the importance of community and big political system support, meaning money. We talked about the importance of starting at birth to 5, birth to 3, parents as teachers, other home visiting things. Head Start and how important Head Start is in identifying health and dental problems that are such a big deal, and connecting families with pediatricians and with the health services that they need in order for those kids to be healthy enough to start school. The absolute importance of quality early childhood education, where kids not only learn all of their colors and numbers and everything, but those social and emotional skills, and that universal, affordable, good preschool, good early childhood education should be universal. And that in order for that to happen, businesses have to start chipping in. Everybody should look at Kaylin's podcast about the guy who had cheese. He had running a cheese factory, and he realized that he needed to help in order to keep good employees. He had to help with the childcare and with the transportation. So I loved that one. The ideas for all of these things can come from somebody in my group runs community cafes, where parents were creating a list of all of the community services that they needed, such as food, transportation, other support services. They needed safety, healthcare, navigation services that were bilingual, bicultural, and that all of their list of community needs was then pushed up to the advocacy group, these navigators who could work with trying to get the political and financial support for all of these services that are needed. And I think that pretty much covered it. If anybody else in my group can think of anything we left out, just throw it in the chat.
Well, thank you to my fellow Maureen. Thanks for summing that up. And I think, this is really important to look at it at all of these stages of the family and the school and the community, and kind of take that focus off of just this 5-year-old child being ready. And, you know, if communities want to be thriving and they want to have a future strong workforce, they have to create conditions in which strong families can live and children can achieve optimal development, and schools are funded and supported. And so I love your comment about the cafe, because I just think even if you were to start a conversation about how do we define readiness and what does readiness mean, a community cafe would be an excellent way of starting that dialogue in a community with the school and community members and parents to talk about those three things. What is a ready family? What is a ready school? What is a ready community? So thank you all so much for that conversation. To wrap up before we go to updates, I just want to give you a few examples of what this can look like in different communities. And I love this quote: start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can, right? So really kind of thinking about small but significant changes. This is an example of what a small community school readiness committee did in partnering with parents. And they were giving out kindergarten coats. And so they decided to use the lens of strengthening families in order to talk to parents about readiness. And so all of their goals have to do with each of the protective factors. So in giving the totes out, it wasn't just about giving the materials out, it was about building parental resilience. They did things as part of the project to build social connections. They included information in the tote with the materials about how their children should use them and how they can engage with their children. They included a family resource guide and gave them concrete supports and talked about social emotional health for their children. So really just kind of switching that lens instead of like, here's all the things your child needs to do, giving them the tools and building conditions within their family that can make them ready. This next one is an example of what it might look like on the national level or the state level. So although this report is older, the Getting Ready report is kind of the story of the National School Readiness Indicators Initiative. And I think this original report was done in 2005, I'm not sure, but it was a 17-state project, and they established school readiness indicators for kids 0 to 8. And they shared what they found throughout the 17 states. And I did like this quote: the only way we can successfully ensure many more children enter school ready is to consider the family and the community context in which they live, the schools they attend, and the services that are available to support their healthy growth and development. So all of those things that you all shared with us and put in the chat, you can look and see, you know, kind of how they define this. We're going to share this link with you, but I think this was a great example of having a broader conversation about what readiness really is. And then Kaylin's going to share this next one.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share for those who aren't familiar, one kind of different way to get at kindergarten readiness while still sticking to some, you know, evidence-based, research-based ways of measuring things is the Early Development Instrument, or EDI. The idea here is that kindergarten teachers fill it out in the second half of the year. So they already know the children pretty well. They're not just having an interaction where the child might be, you know, just shy or uncomfortable in the new building or whatever it might be. So it really reflects their knowledge of the child, and it gets at what are some concerns that might be persisting into the school year versus what they're coming in with. And the other thing that I think is really important about that as well, the questionnaire is completed for each child. The way it's used is at the classroom level, at the school level, at the zip code or population level. So you're really looking at across all the children who started kindergarten this year in our county or in our school, what are their strengths? Where do they still need more support? So it really lends itself to more of that approach. And I put the links here for where that comes from the Offord Center in Canada. I can't remember which university, and then the way that Orange County, California uses it, where it is done for every child in kindergarten.
So we know that many of you are probably doing this work in your part of the country and states. So please feel free to share any resources that you know of in the chat box. We have just put up a few here that we found interesting as we were doing the search. And before we go to updates, I will just ask you maybe to put in the chat if you are aware of any efforts in your community to broaden that definition. Is that something that is already happening? And maybe how you see the lens of the protective factors framework helping you in, building resilience for parents so that when they see a video like the one that we showed you, it doesn't cause so much anxiety and panic, right? Because what we want to do is reduce the amount of stress that we're seeing in families. So thank you all so much for having that conversation with us at such a timely month. So I will just say, I just have one quick update from the Alliance, and that is that we have our last for the year Strengthening Families training of trainers coming up in October 3 through 6. And so this will be the last one for 2022. And then we will have another one coming up in January. So if you are interested at all in becoming an Alliance certified trainer in the Protective Factors Framework, we will put the link in the chat box for you and you can always contact me.
Great, thank you. I will share some quick updates from CSSP as well. And I'm actually
Kaylin, you're on mute all of a sudden.
sorry about that. Apparently that's what happens when you hit return. I thought I was posting these links in the chat. So I have a few updates to share from CSSP. We are co-host of the Together for Families conference, which is a virtual conference being held in October. We co-host that with Families Canada and the National Family Support Network. And we're really excited. We already have over 400 people registered. We are going to cap it at 450. So get that registration in now if you're hoping to come. And we're just really excited for the content, and we are setting it up to be very interactive, as we did in 2020 when people reported it was the most interactive online thing they had done at that point, where we really did try to set people up for networking and conversation, not just listening to content. So I hope a lot of you will be able to join us for that. And you just go to togetherforfamilies.org and the registration is right there. The next update, Maureen Durning mentioned this, the podcast that she was referring to is called The New Neighborhood. This was a limited series podcast. We just released the last episode. So there's just 7 episodes. They're all right around 20-25 minutes long. And each of them focuses on different innovations at the local level that are really trying to build community and recognize how community supports families in their raising young children. So I hope you will check that out. It says there on the slide wherever you get your podcast. However, we know there's a glitch and you can't actually get it on Apple Podcasts, which is maybe where a lot of people get their podcasts. So you can go to our website and click on each episode, or if you use Spotify or Pocket Casts or one of those, it does show up there. Next slide, please. We have a series of Youth Thrive animated videos. So if you are using Strengthening Families Protective Factors, maybe you're also interested in or using the Youth Thrive Protective and Promotive Factors videos. You can find these short animated videos at our website on the Youth Thrive page. And you will see some of it you might be able to share just because it's some of the same concepts. And the framework is parallel to Strengthening Families. So I hope that will be useful for some of you or just fun to see. And finally, I think my last update is a recent policy brief from our policy team called Where Do We Go From Here? How Temporary Investments in the Child Tax Credit and Child Care Impacted North Carolina Families and the Road Ahead. Really talking to families on the ground in North Carolina in particular about how the child tax credit and child care support during the pandemic helped them. And then, the sad truth that those supports have ended and what that means for families going forward and for policy advocacy going forward. So I encourage you to check that out. And I believe those are all my updates. We can put up the slide with contact information for CSSP and for our main Strengthening Families website, which you can get to by going to strengtheningfamilies.net. I've been putting a link in the chat to get a certificate for participating today. If you would like that, I'll put it in one more time. You just have to go to this form and enter your name and email address, check a box that you participated, and we'll get you a certificate next week.
Excellent. Thanks, Kaylin. So you're all still putting stuff in the chat about what you're doing. So I really appreciate that. And we'll just hang on a few minutes while you continue that and open it up. If anybody has any questions, either about the topic today or any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. And thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it.
I will just say to anyone who has a resource you'd like to send, you can send it to me. I'll put my email address in the chat in case you don't have it, and we can post it along with the recording and the slides if you're comfortable with us doing that. Thanks everyone for joining us. Almost everyone got late notice about this, so we're really impressed that folks showed up and really appreciate your participation.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend coming up. Friday Eve.